It is very difficult to be a patient in this country. Often patients go to see a doctor, you're trying to talk to them about your symptom, and they will either say, you're not feeling the symptom, then make you doubt yourself, or say, well, that's not a thing. When it shows up in your blood result or it shows up on X-ray or MRI, it's too late. And then Chinese medicine, that's why it's ultimately the medicine of prevention. We're so ingrained to say, I have a solution for everything. You feel this? I have a pill. Where my patients are constantly amazed where they have 20 symptoms and one formula will just deal with it. Chinese medicine is all about the root cause. The day-to-day life is the reality. And we often escape from that reality. Hey, you know what? Next month, I'm gonna go to Spain. That's when I'm gonna have fun. Right now, I'm just suffering. You're not living in reality. Focus on the present. It's the time we're spending together now. That's what's real.
Hi, everyone. Today's conversation is one of those that really stay with you. And it's not because it's dramatic, but because it's deeply real and refreshingly honest. And my guest today is Jiaming Ju. She's been an economist, a researcher, a mother, and now she's a Chinese medicine practitioner, helping people navigate all kinds of things, everything from long COVID to anxiety, burnout, and even autoimmune disorders, and often when nothing else has worked. But this episode isn't just about her impressive career. It's about what happens when life knocks you down, and how do you put yourself back together in a way that's more grounded, more intentional, and more alive. We talk about the fire that destroyed her home, the grief that followed, and how she used centuries-old healing practices to process her trauma, stay strong for her family, and actually come out of the other side more connected to herself. You'll learn why your digestion might be tied to your anxiety. How do you know if your body is really recovering from stress, and what clues your tongue can give you about your overall health? We get into the pressure we put on ourselves to be happy, the myth of the quick fix, and how slowing down just a little might actually help you heal faster. If you've been feeling off, overwhelmed, or just curious about how to take better care of yourself in a more holistic, real-world way, this one is for you. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. Let's go. So Jiaming, welcome to my house, and thank you for driving.
Thank you.
All the way. And I'm really not only impressed with the amount of lives you've already had, but even recently, you know, being as stoic as you are. You were sharing earlier that, you know, you lost your family home in the Altadena fires. And yet, you know, it's like the beat goes on.
Right.
Like one would not know that from your work and sort of the energy that you put out there into your message. So
thank you.
Maybe you could just share, I was thinking this, what is it in your own practice? You're a Chinese medicine practitioner. You've been an economist. But I'm specifically, are there things that you did to kind of keep yourself together that you actually are borrowing from your practice?
It's really timely to do this podcast with you because last weekend was the first time I went back to my house since the night we escaped. I mean, when we left, right, like we talked earlier, I never thought I was never going to see my house again. It was supposed to be a power cut. You know, you never thought we didn't take anything, etc., like everybody in my neighborhood. And it took me 3 months to go back. That's something I borrowed from my practice. The first months when it happened, you know, you had to isolate you were not processing. I was not processing. There were immediate affairs, you know, lawyers to talk to, things to buy, schools to transfer for
small
your kids.
Children to take care of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to establish that sense of normalcy as quickly as possible when nothing is normal. This was not normal. You couldn't really think about it. You're just focusing on the next thing. And in the second month, things come clear to you now. The reality is, you know, it's gone. Now you see the extent of devastations. You are floored by the amount of grief and occasional depression you might have that I'm talking myself.
Yeah.
Like, you're leaning to work, like my job was about helping people, and most of the time patients come to me when they have no options elsewhere. It's always the strangest of disorders, from long COVID to child alopecia, where a kid will have, autoimmune auto disorders. And I love that. And I channeled that further to work, as I always did. Then the third month came around. And then you had a choice. You have a choice where you could not process your feelings. And you will say, hey, you know what? This is a trauma. We'll put it down. We're going to go somewhere else and we move on. But me knowing what trauma does to us, like I always say in my practice, on my reels, trauma, grief hurts your immunity, hurts your lung, hurts your breathing, this is why when people in their, most deepest sense of depression, they sometimes wake up gasping for air. Or people who have asthma and they're like, I haven't had an asthma attack for years, and they, feel they can't breathe. You feel you can't breathe because the grief overtake you. But I, as a practitioner, knew you had to accept the fact that the grief had to take you like a strong wave inspired by your husband, and we just met. But you're not floored ender.
Yeah.
That's the best outcome one can hope from that. And that means accepting this is all gone. And to accept it, I had to see it.
Yeah.
So after 3 months, I drove back. And it was actually the last day before Army Corps of Engineers removed every single thing, from the land. And
did you go just with your husband, or who did you go with?
I did. I went with my husband, and I saw my house, I saw my neighbor's house, I saw 10 streets ahead of my house all gone, 10 streets after. There wasn't much left of Altadena. There was no church, there were no schools. Both of my kids' schools were burned. Our water company, which is historic, is no more.
Yeah.
You saw that. I cried. I cried on my way over. I cried when I was there. I cried for my memories, my parents' memories. I cried for my kids. I spent all day crying.
Yeah.
But then seeing is accepting. I accepted it so I could move on. If I never went, part of me would have not dealt with it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have faced it.
No.
It's so interesting because we live in an interesting time where I feel like, and I'm sure you see this way more than I would ever, is you have a group that's almost eager to diagnose all of their issues. But I sort of liken it to the overcorrection of just, if you're in the US, it's suck it up, buck up. Your culture is very stoic, So I find it interesting where it's this idea of, hey, listen, when something is hard, give yourself permission to go through a process of it's hard. But at some point we have to face it. And then at some point, for our own benefit, we do have to find the ways to move on.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting because I think people go through things when they're younger and they don't realize how it can really, that's that book, The Body Keeps the Score, just how it can show up, but also how you can heal.
Right.
So maybe we can, I do want to share though, that I really appreciate that your son's smart enough to write a book about his experience.
Yeah.
Because he basically journaled it.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty beautiful for a young human to know that.
He woke up one morning and he journaled what happened when we left. The minute he spotted the fire, he thought he spotted a fire, by the way, out of everybody else. And then how we escaped in the car, what he brought. what he doesn't have. And then he told me, this gets me every single time. And he said, hey, you know, Mom, like all my stuffy animals and all my toys, they did not die. I was like, oh, really? He said, they were just like, they turned into forest fairies. And I will always remember them.
Yeah.
And that gets me every single time. Because he accepted, you know, my kid accepted this before I did it. Like he accepted this was a trauma. This hurt. He wrote a book about it to document his experience and his feelings. And then he moved on from that. I don't think he will ever forget, maybe, but it will not. The body only keeps a score. The body always remembers, right? Yeah. We say in Chinese medicine that, you know, you cannot, and I always say this to my patients who, you know, I have a lot of patients who come to me because of physical issues and most of the time mental issues as well. A lot of them are not responding to SSRIs, right? Because there is a particular form of anxiety and depression and even ADHD that are more linked to your physical health. And I remember one of my patients asked me that, and he said, I feel so good now, like this was after months, and he's like, why can't you just make them all go away immediately? I said, you know, I need you to recognize this thing happened, have the physical strength and mental strength to recognize that someone did an injustice to you, you have been hurt, but now you're not vulnerable. You're going to move on from it. So I said, I need you to recognize that first and suffer a little. Because you have to suffer by recognizing someone did you an injustice, or the world is so scary, like, you know, something happened, like who asked for this? No one. You need to recognize that in order to move on. You can't, we're not machines.
Right, we can't stuff it.
No.
It's a really beautiful idea too of letting someone feel comfortable with this idea of we can face something, we can be scared, we can be hurt and safe. Because I think that's what happens. It's like, oh man, I don't want to take the lid off that. Yeah. That's too big. So you've had already in your short life so many careers. So what was it from your dad has a practice in China, and you were the only one. Yeah. Is this right? Who could take it over?
Yeah.
And you were not disappointing him, but you decided to become an economist.
Right.
But you were in the clinic when you were little.
Yeah.
So there's interesting things. I think when we do things and we're exposed to things when we're young, it's much more intuitive. Things are getting put into you that you didn't even know just by being around your dinner table, your father, his patients, just all of that.
Yeah.
But what in you thought, oh yeah, I'm not doing that?
At the time.
Was that rebellion?
Oh my God. So my mother is a really famous geriatrician. It's very boring. Every meal table, all they talk about is my mom gets very frustrated. Like she will talk about my diabetic patients, you know, she is on this, but you know, is a bandage solution. She's never going to get better. And then inevitably, because we lived in not like, it's a big city by any other standard, but in China, which is huge, is not a big city. And then inevitably, this patient will make way to my dad. And the quality of life will then go from, I take 20 pills a day and I feel like crap, to, oh, I can go and do like square dance with my friends. But it was very dull when both of your parents are in this, you know. And then my dad is like, well, you're the only one, you know, one child policy. You're really the only one. Not even like implying directly point blank tell me. I, like any other Asian kid, I did the opposite. I'm like, what is going to be the opposite thing from this where I'm going to do? And I think I always wanted things a little bit differently. Like I see how hard my parents worked. And my dad, even today, will have like crazy 40 patients waiting for him in the snow in the winter because he's that famous.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I don't want to be chained to a clinic He was in his clinic all day. It is so much effort. It is a lot of effort the way I do it, one-on-one for patients every single time. But that's why we do it so effectively. But then I didn't want that as a kid. I wanted the opposite. I wanted to see the world. I've always been fascinated by philosophy, and I have always been an Amber person. And I'm like, I'm going to do the opposite of what my dad does. So I became an economist. But I really worked for the Economist, the magazine, from running a Nobel Prize winner's person's think tank in New York City and then running the largest think tank on longevity, in the world at the time in Singapore. Each time it got a little bit closer to what my parents did. Ultimately, I was focusing on longevity and health. And you realized how disappointing the data is, how distorted the data is, how incomplete the data is. It's almost saying, oh, by the age of where you're turning like 60, now you have 5 possible chronic conditions. Now, why don't you pick one?
Yeah.
It is disappointing. At one point when I had my first child and I was thinking, I was at the height of my economist career, being the random Asian women in a sea of older men. I was like, is this really it? Is this really what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Yeah. And I'm like, if you say you're an economist, are people going to want me in their retirement village? I can't even advise people on their stock market because, house economists, like, what do you do? And then something happened one day that completely changed my perspective. I think I never said to my dad, absolutely no. I was more like, let's just not talk about it. And we did that for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And then when I had my child, postpartum, I started developing some symptoms, which is very common among postpartum women. It resembles something like an arthritis, but it's in Chinese medicine, it's called postpartum arthritis. It's from overworking your wrist by holding your baby. Yeah. And also, so I went to see a doctor and they're like, we got to do surgery on your hand. I was like, this cannot be it. Like this, I need a second opinion. I called my dad and he said a bunch of things I didn't understand. I was like, what are you talking about? And then he sent me a bunch of things and I took it. It was gone for good in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Would he send you some herbs and teas?
Yeah. He basically wrote me a customized formula. Yeah. And then he's like, oh, it's nothing. It's called postpartum, no, whatever. Like you don't need to know it and blah, blah. Next thing, it was gone. And then, it made me realize something is maybe I don't just want to be the person who understands those data. I always have that capability, but maybe I want to make that data better on a singular way. This is what my patients tell me is like, you mean I didn't have to suffer 25 years? Like you could have changed this, or you have completely transformed our life. Nobody ever told me that when I was an economist. At best, when I was advising governments, politicians, it was, oh, we already decided what we're going to do. So this data point would just be good to have. A sense of purpose, but more importantly, like what you're actively doing for the world has completely shifted.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I decided to retrain, which shocked my dad because he was like, you are no spring chicken. Oh
my gosh.
At the time I was like, I was going to be pregnant. I didn't know I was going to be pregnant. It was my second child. Yeah. I was in my 30s, and he was like, you are no spring chicken. But then he was surprised, finally was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Because he knew I never promised things if I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So that was that.
This podcast is brought to you by OneSkin. OneSkin is a company that was created in 2016 by 4 female scientists. I've personally been using the product for years now. My friend first gave it to me as a gift, and then I purchased Face. She gave me the eye cream. I've been loving their sunblock. And what I appreciate about this is these 4 female scientists were trying to figure out how to make better skincare. Well, after testing the efficacy of more than 900 so-called anti-aging peptides, they developed something called the OS01 peptide. It's the first ingredient to reverse skin's biological age by reducing the accumulation of something called senescent cells, which is a key driver of skin aging. So now with their new scalp serum that I've been using for about a month now, I think my hair looks really good. They have OS01 hair. It's here to help us with hair loss, thinning, and shedding. So why would a skincare company create a scalp treatment? Well, it makes sense because the scalp is skin. And just like the rest of your body, it experiences cellular aging. Makes sense. But instead of wrinkles, it messes with your hair follicles and natural growth cycle, leading to things like hair loss and thinning. OS01 Hair is the first scalp serum powered by OneSkin's OS01 peptide, which targets those aging cells. It's scientifically proven to help your hair cells do what they're meant to do, grow fuller, denser, healthier hair. So you can get to the root of hair loss and thinning with OS01 Hair. You'll save 15% off your first purchase with the code REECE, REECE, at oneskin.co. That's ONESKIN.co. And if they ask where you heard about them, support the show, tell them, they've been taking care of our listeners and our skin for a few years now. Don't forget, use the code REECE, REECE, to save 15% off. All you have to do is go to oneskin.co. This podcast is brought to you by Ritual. I've been taking Ritual since COVID started. Like everyone, I understood the importance of vitamin D. I'm outside all the time. I'm still always trying to figure out how to get vitamin D. And I was looking for a great multi, and a friend of mine told me about Ritual, and I've been taking it ever since. And then I started really learning more about the importance of just the power of vitamin D and trying to get it in your diet and how hard it is just to get things in your food. And then I started getting even deeper and trying to figure out, well, is everyone vitamin D deficient? Well, 97% of women ages 19 to 50 are not getting enough vitamin D from their diet. And Ritual's Essential for Women 18 plus was shown to increase vitamin D levels by 43% in a clinical study. And they'll even, check that out. And it's in 12 weeks. They put 9 key nutrients in 2 delayed release capsules per day that optimize your body's absorption. So very, very easy to take, really gentle on an empty stomach, and it has a minty essence in every bottle. So you don't have to try to worry hey, do I have food in my stomach? Don't I? It just makes it really easy that you don't have any weird vitamin burps. And, only about 1% of supplement brands on the market have the USP verified mark, which shows the product contains the ingredients actually listed on the label. I know you think that supplement companies, it's all clean. It's a little bit shady. And Ritual's multivitamins are vegan, non-GMO, project verified, gluten and major allergen free. They're certified B Corp, so they have great business practices, and all their ingredients are made traceable. And they have an incredible offer for you today. So if you want to avoid all that shady business, if you're investing in your health and you want to know you're getting the good stuff, Ritual's Essential for Women 18 plus is a multivitamin you can actually trust. I even share it with my daughters. You will get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/Gabby. You can start your Ritual or add Essential for Women 18 plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/Gabby for 25% off. That's ritual.com/Gabby. I was curious when I was thinking about this fire, but even in going through what you went with going to school and doing a career change, because it is it can be not unsettling, but it can just lift you up from everywhere. How did you ground yourself? Because I feel like when we have the opportunity to ground ourselves, no matter what's happening in time and space or wherever we are, I'm wondering if you have something in your own personal practice that you do, given just what you've gone through or transitions, that really helps you sort of stay upright most of the time. I mean, listen, we have to tip over from time to time.
Yeah.
I look at it as a reorienting. But is there something you do that sort of just helps you ground within yourself?
There are 2 things I do. One thing is, I don't even know how to call it. I was always the odd kid. Kind of, I had to, at different point in my life, had to focus on the process rather than defining myself. So, for example, when I was 15 years old, I would get be the first one, had the highest grade on English and Chinese, and then would be ranked literally absolutely the last in the class for chemistry, simply because I was not interested. I didn't want to. And in time, I learned that, and growing up in an Asian society where you don't think you follow, right? Everyone says, this is what everyone is doing, you're going to do that. I questioned a lot why we're doing a certain things. Mm-hmm. But then, like, to me, it was more like, I spent in my adult years, I spent very little time. I spent a long time in my adolescent years thinking what I want to do with my life. But when I made a decision, it's pretty much, I don't think about, I don't, after graduate from college, like how I define myself, I don't. I just carry it on.
Yeah.
So I spent very little time in thinking, am I going to be the biggest person in Chinese medicine in the world? Like, that doesn't interest me. What I feel grounded by is by thinking, is this fun? Did I have fun today? I did. This has been a hellish week with consultations. Hellish months is always very booked. And I'm always grateful and feel rewarded for what I do, because I can see how many people I'm helping from impossible conditions that I think of. And that's enough for me. I don't need to think my goal of the month is I must do blah, blah, blah. Like, it's first off, is it fun? Because you're working for yourself. If it's not fun, why do it, right? And the second thing is, I don't chase happiness. I think this may be a cultural thing.
Yeah, I don't chase it either. I understand. Because here, something's wrong with us if we're not happy versus like a sense of peace, or you used the word purpose earlier. I think people don't give the feeling of feeling purposeful enough juice. I think it can be a really supportive thing to lean on.
Right.
Yeah.
I focus on being content, which is a very, when I first moved to the States for Columbia, for grad school, I was very confused because it's the polar opposite of, feeling content. Like, everyone was ready to give an elevator speech. Everyone was ready to tell you, I'm gonna be a diplomat in 3 years. People with every fiber of their being ambitious. There is nothing wrong with that. But in the face of trauma, in the face of what you're doing, if your so-called doing for me is like being a mother, being an entrepreneur, like living in the moment, like enjoying my favorite book or whatever, like those are important. And I'm content. I don't chase, am I happy today? I mean, like, I think it's a uniquely American thing because, I spent a lot of time in Europe. I was schooled in Europe. And then, like, you don't hear people talking about, I'm happy today. Like, I don't think it's that. Like, the Italians eat gelato is just a way of life. They're happy. But for us, it's like, gotta go queue up for the newest open $12 gelato in Lashmont. Like, it is always a destination. But for me, it's like, this is a process. And if you focus on that, you get less anxious. You get pulled to reality. Yeah. You know?
Well, that notion of, and we can talk about Chinese medicine, but, in certain other cultures, the idea of like, being present and all these things that we find the way to make a slogan around it, and a business and a whole thing around it. But just being, even recognizing like, today was this was a really stacked week. Like I got my ass kicked a little, but it's good, instead of, the down and the up. So do you have that? I only smiled about the fun part because Laird is very much about like, is this what we're going to do with our lives? If we're are we answering emails and doing the thing, or are we going to like have fun? And I'm wondering, even within your friendships or your relationship, because I think about that in our relationship where it's like, even kind of surveying, are we making sure that we're not just going through the motions to that end destination, but are we actually enjoying the process? And so it sounds like you have that down. Do you have that even in with your marriage? If you realize like you're going along, do you sort of go, hey, we should switch it up a little?
It's funny because it's date night tonight. And I am not a romantic person. I think by any means or definition, like seriously, I'm not. But my husband is like the polar opposite of me. We have very similar life goals. That's why we're married, but we have very different approach. He is extremely detail oriented. I am not. I constantly cannot find my things. Even before I came today, I was like, I texted him when I was upstairs after seeing a patient. I'm like, I need to find my bag. Like, where is it? And he was working downstairs and he kind of came up, and helped me. But it's interesting you say that because marriage is hard.
Well, yeah, and you have 2 small children and you just lost your home.
Right.
You're living with your mother-in-law, and I don't care how great she is.
Yeah, but it's hard.
Those are layers and layers.
Because, again, I come back, it is very hard. We have had, we talked about I lived from New York to Singapore to England. I lived in many places, and we have had different versions of perhaps similar arguments, in different cities that we lived in. And when you have kids, you have more arguments.
Yeah. Well, everyone's tired.
Everyone is tired. At some point, you're just like, are we screaming on parallel here? Are we just yelling, not care whether the other person can hear? Mm-hmm. And because we are the polar opposite in our way of handling things in the face of a big trauma and tragedy like this, our way was very different. It took him much longer to process, although to the next person, it's definitely not long. I mean, the fire was 3 months ago. I, on the other hand, being the logical economist that I am, almost made an Excel sheet, right? And come up with 5 possible scenarios of what we're going to do. But I learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn about this partnership, right? Mm-hmm. That is marriage, and
the dance
is, like you said, a dance.
Yeah.
It is not about this song is good, we're dancing, and next song we don't really like it, or he likes it, or you don't like it, you don't dance anymore. It is about the project.
Yeah.
That is this family.
Yeah. Well, and also I think people don't realize if you can dance with a partner that gets you enough, right? We're never going to fully understand each other. It's almost like you'll get to do your dance even better with the support of that family.
Yeah.
And even though the family is demanding and takes a lot, there's the strength of love that you get to go out like you're doing now. You're going out and doing this whole new thing.
Yeah.
Even making yourself available online. Partially because you have people at home that are like, oh yeah, we believe in you. We got you. We love you. And, then the toe stomping, all of a sudden, what really falls away the longer you've been together is like the silly things, I mean, I think you learn, or you get divorced or you hate each other. So it's, those are sort of the options. I think it's better to be together and figure out how to enjoy it. But again, it's just, it's an interesting thing. And you guys come from very different backgrounds. So I'm just curious. So now you have your practice. You sort of, how did you figure out? Because what's interesting is modern day business is combining, if you can, the internet. And so, and how do you punch through? And you have. And, this whole idea of like, you look at people's tongues, was it like you did it once and it was like, oh, that really resonates. So I'll drive down on that, because I want to get into the depth a little bit more of your practice. But I am really curious how you thought, oh, you know what? That seems to work.
My dad was very confused about what I was doing. I would say like for 2 years. I'm not 100% sure he understands it now. Until one day I sent him that I was featured by, Wall Street Journal, which the big economist nerd in me is like, made it.
Yeah.
My dad didn't even read the article. But like, I think I know from the very beginning that I didn't want to have a physical clinic. I mean, I do see patients sometimes in person, but a majority of my patients from all over the world, I see them virtually.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be kidnapped by a physical clinic like my dad.
Going back to your dad. Yeah.
Right. Because I thought about this Chinese medicine thing. It's been around for 3,000 years. The business model has been the same for 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Chinese medicine is amazing, but there is a reason why many people say it's not scalable, or many people say that, it takes so much effort. If you're known in one city, you might not be known, but, in another city. And I think it's not because the medicine was not enough. The problem is the medicine is too much. Yeah. It's very difficult to find an entry point other than, the yin and yang, like everyone knows the yin and yang, but like the ethos of the yin and yang is a very complex thing. And me, as an economist, my joy and my bread and butter for my job was always to make a very complex thing filled with very complex data into biteable sizes. Because I had to frequently deal with politicians who probably had 30 minutes, of their time. So I was like, why don't we try to do that with Chinese medicine? And the reason why we thought about the tongue was I did it one time. And my team, I have to thank Milu, again, my wonderful, social media manager, fractional CMO there.
Yeah.
And because we quickly realized everyone has a tongue. The problem of Chinese medicine is that it's packed with philosophy, theory, beautiful ones, but nobody has anything to refer to, right?
Because some of it would be instinct.
Right.
On the practitioner's part, right?
Exactly. It is, you can be, like I always say, I have so much respect for acupuncture, which I'm fluent in doing also, but that's the physical therapy part of Chinese medicine, right? Traditionally, customized Chinese medicine, the way we do it, my father and I do it, has always been the elitist. Because it's unfair to say this, but has always been more about lineage. It's not only about learning. The learning is like 10% from the book. 90% is through family practice. My dad has been in practice for how many years now? 40 or maybe longer? 40 patients a day. You do the math how many patients there are. And he was one of the first people in China who started using online virtual treatment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of data. And to me, it was like, we got to find an entry point that people themselves can have something to refer to. And I'm like, I'm going to do the tongue. And as a comedian wannabe, I would like to think I am really funny. I have a deadpan humor thanks to my 4 years of training in England. So I just went for it. And I didn't know it would blow up so big.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is really, if you're going to get through to people, and then what I love is this idea of getting them interested in their health from a completely different point of view.
Right.
And reminding people that things about us, how we appear, is an indication that something's going on.
Right.
I feel like in the US especially, we're a little bit disconnected from some of this. So let's say we would go to your dad's clinic. If a new patient came in there versus the US, are they navigating different health issues? I'm sure we're probably bigger in the US. We're dealing with weight and some other stuff. But I'd be curious if there's some distinction just because of lifestyle. I
love it you're asked these questions. Nobody has asked me this before, and I love talking about it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So I would nerd out with my dad for hours about this, because to me, as an economist who studies data, this is fascinating. I would say because Yangsheng, which in Mandarin means a bunch of, behavior changes one does, rooted in Chinese medicine, that is so deeply ingrained in the culture. Issues like weight or certain things like certain common skin issues are less common in China. Autoimmune conditions are less common in China. They very much so, when you do see autoimmune, situation, obviously lupus, is there, but it's not as common as the States. I would say also even long COVID, which my dad and I treat very often. I treat patients, so basically anybody who is not from China, and he treats his patients in China. Long COVID symptoms in China is a lot less severe than long COVID patients here or in Britain. I would say like 9 out of 10 of my patients from Europe have long COVID. Like it's more, in the US is also the symptoms that manifest itself is a lot more severe. And I think it's down to two things. One is emotional stagnation, the amount of stress, the amount of anxiety, the amount of, self-expectation, ambition we put on ourselves, or simply because our society is this go, go, go. If you don't do certain things, you literally can't afford living in LA, etc. Is so much that the emotional strain that one has no one but themselves or your immediate family, if you're lucky, is much more than China. Nobody in China it's very rare for a person to say, okay, I am so stressed. Of course that happens. But whether people like it or not, China, your family is a unit. Your mom and dad, your in-laws, like your siblings, like your cousins. I mean, it's just like you don't want to invite them to your weddings, but you have to. Yeah. They do come to your rescue when things go wild, right? Yeah. In this country, it's like, what happens if a young person, loses their job the next day? You can call your mom, sure, but the safety net in this country is not there. We're basically saying, no matter how successful we are, we are all waiting for the next shoe to drop, because if something doesn't work out, then you're like, I am at risk of losing everything. I think in China specifically, or Asia in general, is a little bit different, not only because of social safety net, there is the family that will always be there. So most of my patients in the US and in Europe, to a lesser degree, but definitely in the US, will have physical issues and very severe, mental issues. So anxiety, for example, we talked about how digestive issues will always come with anxiety because they come hand in hand in Chinese medicine. Low motivation, right? Someone being depressed, or simply, I like to call it, constantly have an air of melancholy. Yeah. You can't get excited. You don't even know how you're feeling. You're just you're completely detached from your, physical body. That is, in Chinese medicine, actually a form of depression. That is the kind of depression that rarely respond to SSRI. And that happens with digestive issues and then hormonal changes, a bunch of things. It's always linked to the physical. We see that more here. And the other thing, like I mentioned, is the behavior in terms of diet. If you have the audacity to eat ice cream when you're on your menstruation in China, your mom will disown you. Nobody does that. There are simple things that are rooted in Chinese medicine, like I said, is so deeply ingrained, people just don't do. Yeah. Where I see girls, I have a lot of teenage and children patients who have autoimmune disorder when they're 16 years old or 15 years old, or even during puberty. And then if I ask, high cravings for sugar from such a young age, such high anxiety because our schools are just crazy now, such high expectation. And then if you ask, what have you been eating? And don't know, probably just a lot of salad and maybe burger with my friends, this is a fundamentally different thing from China or Asia, where I'm not saying that is the only way to do it, but like food has such a central role that there are literally at least 4 dishes and 1 soup for every single meal.
Yeah. And fermented foods as well.
Right.
So,
and you have a balance of color, you have a balance of nutrition, and that's, people spend a lot of time doing that, but like that is so central to the culture. So you do see the result, right? That is very different. So I always say this to my dad. I think my patients from Europe and the US are usually way more severe in terms of the conditions they suffer from compared to his patients in China.
Yeah. I think so many things you said are so important, which first of all, it's ingrained, it's taught early. And it's like, yeah, this is just what you do, but this is also ancient wisdom.
Right.
That it's like, hey, it works, pass it on. It works, pass it on. And in a way, the great thing about the US is, hey, you can come here and be anything and be anyone and do anything. But the side of that is we don't have some of these practices. And then the other thing is this idea of a safety net and gathering around food. Somewhere in our culture, I always laugh that when I watch that, when TV dinners came out, that was like almost like a prestigious thing. That, you got this thing that you just heated up and you could sit and watch TV. Like it was almost a sign of some kind of success. It was weird. But in a way, and we talk about it, but are we doing it? Are we preparing food together? Are we gathering? And you said something funny. You go, I know this takes time, but they're doing it. So also within us is we've said, hey, we haven't shared or taught our kids the value of putting time into that.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, get to work, eat at your desk, eat in your car. I mean, eat in your car. Like, I mean, this is what we do here. So I can see that. It's so interesting. I'm curious from your dad's point of view. So if he had a magic wand and thought, oh, geez, these Americans, like, just do this and this. Okay, so eat more diverse food, diverse colors, real food. What about movement? I feel like walking, Tai Chi, certain kinds of things are practiced just as something that you do more there. We're here, it's like we have to put so much effort. Like we're going to work out, we're going to do this thing. So is that also woven into kind of the whole culture?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I have so much to say about this. I was in Italy a few weeks ago, and Italians, high carb diet. You rarely see overweight Italians.
Yeah.
Because as they say it, 7 hills in Rome, whether you like it or not, you walk that hill. My kids being 4 and 6, whenever we travel, I never stroll them or carry them. You walk as much as we do, 20,000 steps a day at least. People, that's why they don't have a lot of issues. You're walking everywhere. Walking becomes part of your life. Where in this country, unless you live in New York City, you drive to your gym. How much time that's going to take, first off? You get frustrated because of traffic, right, in LA. Then you do your thing. Then you drive home.
Yeah, you get a nice cortisol spike on the way to the gym.
Yeah. And then you're just like, then you get angry on the highway. Driving highway, honestly, in LA is one of the easiest way to have a hypertension. Yeah. Right? Like you just get so frustrated. And then when you get home, it's so late. Then you have no choice but to eat a prepackaged dinner or a salad by your dad, like by your bed, and then, or you're in your kitchen, and then you watch a bit of TV, you go to bed. This is literally how most people in California, majority part of the country, live.
Yeah.
We're not, people say that, parents are best examples for the kids. We're not being best examples for our kids. If this is how we do it every day, like all what the kids see is, well, my parents spend majority of their time at work away from me. And then when they come back, they rush to make something for me, then can't wait to put us down, then go to the gym, and then I don't see them or whatever. It's not fun. We're not showing our kids to say, hey, when you become an adult, you can do gazillion things. from the way I see it, it all seems downhill from here. Once you graduate from college, it's like, real life sucks.
Yeah.
Any teenager, I don't think, teenagers in this country, and I have had a lot of teenager, patients, they're not excited. We're trying to tell them like, oh, go to college, go to a good college.
Yeah.
But the whys, why do you need to go to a good college? For what? By the end of the day, we're not leaving much of room for our kids to imagine to have a life that's different from, I don't know, what we're showing them every day, So movement is so essential, but it's not just a movement of the physical movement. I will always tell my patients who say, oh, I have low motivation, I don't want to do anything physical. I'm like, most people don't. It's not about that.
Right. Our biology is set up to keep us as lazy as possible.
Exactly.
Right.
I said, I'm not telling you to go hunt a bear or something. Like, it's about walking. Yeah. It's very simple.
Yeah.
You walk, it's free. The problem, obviously, of living in a place like LA is like, where do you walk? In the parking lot? Like, it's so difficult to find a place.
Yeah. But a neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know what it is too, if we could add to that, because if people are actually taking time to do that, don't be on your phone.
Yeah.
Like, it's the funniest thing, all the things you can see.
Yeah.
Even if you live in a concrete neighborhood, right? Like you can walk and see how the banyans take over and lift the sidewalk, or you can notice one neighbor has some pretty flowers. Like people don't realize all of that, what it does to your system, and to be outside. I mean, I've really come to a place where if you asked me a year or two ago, I would say, okay, nutrition and movement, obviously, rest, sleep, community, all these things. But, the deeper I've gone into these conversations, it's like you realize sunlight. We're all afraid of the sun and being in the sun. Now, 12 o'clock, noon, maybe not. But early, later, all of these things that we're skipping. So what else is it? Because it must be so fascinating to have grown up and been a fully formed person in one whole culture, and to have parents who are so involved in this care, health care component. If you were going to make an invitation, so, I think a lot of us feel locked in, like, oh, well, this is just what I have to do. So if you have a patient, maybe they come to you and they're in their 30s, and you go, wait, you have an opportunity here to really not go down this path of sick care.
Yeah.
Besides, preparation of their food and moving and making sure they're in meaningful relationships. Do you have a process of, are they taking tests with you? Like, what is it that you're doing also to get another look under the hood to kind of help them?
So the way I do my consultation one-on-one is fundamentally different from the way my dad does it.
Right.
The traditional Chinese way of doing it is they will take your pulse. It's very quick. It's almost like magic. They take your pulse. Then they tell you what your life is like. You think it's scary for me to tell your tongue? Try my dad. It's worse. It's very fast. This is why he could see, 40 patients a day, right? The way I do it, it takes an hour. One has to have a fascination about your patient or the next person's story, which I do infinitely. I am a nerdy economist, but inside I'm a gossip. Not that I gossip with anyone else, obviously, but I love to hear.
Tell me about you.
Their health journey.
Yeah.
Or their life. I see that as a privilege. And what I do is I will ask, depending on what they have, usually I will ask a huge category of questions about digestion, right? From their appetite to their digestive symptoms to their bowel movement. I get very detailed. And
is it once a day? Is it 12 inches? Like, I've heard it all.
Exactly. Is it palace? Is it like you don't go for you only go once a week? I ask about urination. I ask a lot about some odd questions.
Yeah.
If you do physical exertion, do you sweat as much as the next person? Do you, think about if you don't think water is good for you, do you actually have natural thirst? And then a lot of mental health questions. The reason is because the physical health in Chinese medicine is mental health. Every single internal organ has a specific emotion linked to it. Yeah. I will always ask a patient, right? A patient who potentially has hypertension. And I will always ask, do you have a constant low grade of irritability? I will ask, do you feel sometimes you cannot control your temper? You snap at people, then you immediately regret it. Those are very important information for me to have a thorough and comprehensive understanding of their mental health and physical health. This is why people heal physically and mentally.
Listen, this is the only reason I train. It's so I can be a sane human being. People think I train. Yeah, I came from sports, but at the end, once you really understand that, for me, it's the only way to even have a fighting chance, to kind of show up emotionally the way I'm hoping to. Is all this, trying to eat well and move and, get to bed. So can you share with us maybe is kidneys fear and apprehension? What is kidneys, right?
Fear and apprehension for kidney.
Yeah.
So, very, very easily, I'll give this example. I have been having a lot of straight men patients who have vitality issues. So, which is interesting because I come from the health economics background. I also know all the stats.
Oh, yeah, it's scary.
Now it's getting earlier and earlier, right? The sperm quality is not there. And vitality things for men commonly usually start showing around when you're 38 and 39, but not in a major way. Now it's getting earlier and earlier. I have had patients in their 20s who have sexual dysfunction problem.
So erectile dysfunction, and then what, a little added weight?
So erectile dysfunction, and it's frustrating because they might not have low libido, but they have a performance problem.
Yeah.
Or for some reason, you're peeing more than once a night. Urination for men is a great indicator. I will always ask, given how much water you drink during the day, do you think you're peeing too often, appropriate, or not often enough, or night urination? That is always linked to vitality because it's linked to your sexual health.
Yeah.
And often for men, what happens is that libido will be low, then performance is lackluster. Then there isn't even that much of seminal fluid. You do see that, and it's getting younger and younger and younger. And, so it's not supposed to even touch kidney health yet, but in Chinese medicine, it is getting younger, right? Because we're fearful. If we think about fear, how fear plays in our society, we're fearful for losing our job. Yeah. We're fearful for disappointing our partner. We're fearful for what's going to happen next day when you send your kids to school.
And our world's too big.
Right.
Our phone gives us insights to every bad thing.
Exactly.
We're not supposed to know this much stuff. We're not supposed to be inundated constantly with that. We all supposedly don't agree and don't care about each other.
Right.
So could what do you do for a guy like that?
It's interesting.
If they're not watching a bunch of porn, let's just say.
Right.
How do you, and let's say they're okay, like they eat okay and they move enough, because it really ends up being the stress, sitting. I'm curious if your father, because he'd have a longer history on it, the phone, the blue light.
Yeah.
Does your dad have any feelings about that?
Well, so I will give a rough example of a real patient, right? First off.
Not a name and address.
Not a name and an address. Very rough. The patient came to me from being years after being in law enforcement, right? High stressful job. Now he's in his 50s, still in good shape, but he noticed that low motivation, don't lose weight as fast, sometimes have binging or cravings, feel tired when he's not supposed to feel tired, libido and performance are lower, peeing really often during the day and occasionally at night, kind of feel he literally can't relax. He's still living his old life or be a first responder. And he feel like now in retirement, he can't shake that off. And yet at the same time, he's feeling mentally, he's just on high tension all the time. So I had to, every single time when we decide to write a customized formula, you have to put all the symptoms together. And this one formula aims to go to the root of this issue. And for this particular individual who also had very bad occasional hypertension, so he had a pounding headache from time to time. He could hear his blood in his ears. It was a typical liver yang rising, we call it in Chinese medicine. So it's like, in a nutshell, means his upper body is still reacting to past trauma and experience, but the root of the body, the kidney, is no longer a 18 years old body. So you're like a candle where you're still burning bright and on the top, but there is no wax supporting you. The wax is going to be in danger of running out. And this is a very common condition, actually, for men at this age. And we wrote a formula specifically for him, and I will remove the nerdy bit of writing the formula. So when I had my first follow-up with him, was actually this morning before I came. He's let's just say his wife has not been happy for the longest time.
Yeah. And now she's smiling.
She's smiling. He is so happy.
Yeah.
The hypertension no longer seems to present itself because this is not often hypertension, you know, the definition is a certain way, but like he only has it from time to time. But when he does have it, it's very high. And that then is linked to, you know, lung capacity, think about his old job or like heart functionality. And all of his symptoms disappeared. But disappeared and mentally he can finally, as he called it, come down. Yeah. But not delusional. Not like you had weed and you're like, okay, now I'm so relaxed. Because he couldn't. But it's more, he's still himself, but a way more balanced way of himself. And, you know, and sexually, he is very happy. His wife has been very happy. And he no longer has that post-sex exhaustion.
So do you give in the formula like herbs and teas and when to take it? And are you adding things into his nutrition? How does it work?
So you will have a bunch of resources specifically based on your diet preference. Awesome. And he got that. And then also a lot of personalized information specifically related to his formula and a lot of lifestyle tips specifically for his formula. Yeah. So it's incredibly customized. And every single time when we do the follow-up, as you get better, I will lower the dosage or I tweak something depending on whether you have new things or something improved. It is the most customized thing on human earth. And my manufacturer, both in Europe and also in California, are super annoyed because they said, nobody does this anymore. Yeah. Nobody, who does this every single time? I'm like, I do. And in the early days, there are many people who are like, how are you going to scale? I'm like, well, I'll focus on that later. But the important thing is I'm treating the impossible. And this is a good example because when you're in your 50s, you're not supposed to have all these issues. But in this country, we do. And then what is the usual way people do it? They will take a Viagra.
Hell. Yeah, they'll mask the symptom and not deal, like you said, with the root.
Exactly. Or people will say, I'm going to get some, male hormones injected in me. And what's going to happen in that regard is you're going to be bothering your wife all the time, but you will have very, very, at best, mediocre performance. Yeah. Because it's the yin and yang. The yang is interest, the yin is ejaculation. Most of the time, this will just lead to premature ejaculation. And very soon, after taking Viagra or having too much male hormones, you're going to feel a tightness in your chest. Because because in Chinese medicine, kidney is connected to your heart. This is why most people who are long, chronic Viagra users will have a heart problem sooner or later. And that's not fun. So
if somebody, because I know you see a lot of people who either feel like they have ADHD. I sort of feel like, and especially in young males with a lot of testosterone, it almost feels like a natural behavior. They're just put in an unnatural environment, like sitting in a desk at school. And then all of a sudden they go, well, he can't concentrate. It's like, well, maybe he's not supposed to just sit there all day long. Right. Maybe they should exercise first and then come to class. I don't know. It's all this. So you see a lot of people with ADHD, certain things like ADHD and either a form of depression or anxiety.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because now that's something like people are very happy to have. You know, like when I was growing up, if you were battling something, you almost kept it quiet. Now it's become a thing of like, yeah, and everybody's diagnosed, they all have something. Instead of maybe something's off in my body, I'm going through a weird thing, I could figure out how to improve upon this. How do you, if somebody comes to you and they're a younger person and they're saying, hey, I'm having a hard time, maybe a menopausal woman, but focusing, where would you look first?
So the inability to focus has everything to do with digestive health. I think we talked about this briefly. The spleen, which is not to be confused by the Western spleen, is in charge of taking whatever you eat and turn it into Qi and blood, like a blender.
Wait, what do you mean? Not to be confused?
Because spleen in Western medicine has none of the function that Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine, we also call it spleen, but it's really a broader concept of digestion, right?
Got it.
And when I do the tongue videos, I often tell people like, don't be offended, but I'm now going to use an analogy of a blender. So are you going to be Ninja Bullet $20 or your Vitamix 500, right? It makes a difference. And the spleen, how well your body is able to process whatever you eat and turn it into Qi and blood, you know, functionality of your internal organs and blood has everything to do with how good this blender is, right? This processing thing. And is linked with the emotion that's overthinking and anxiety. This is the reason why. And it also is linked to a flavor called sweet. This is the reason why you will also notice people who have problem focusing often want to have something sweet. Have something sweet. They never feel great after having the sweet because their body, the stronger your sugar cravings are, the less your body is able to process it. And they mistake that as, oh, I'm intolerant to carb or dairy because carb and dairy also contain sugar, right? And then the more anxiety they have. This kind of anxiety is very unique. It's very different from, you see something, you get triggered.
Right.
It's more twofold. One, you get triggered. You don't even have a moment to process it. It turns straight into, I am feeling overwhelmed. The second type of anxiety related to this is you feel you have a constant low grade of anxiety. You just don't feel settled. You know you're anxious. You have no idea why you're anxious. And then you just carry on being like this. And this is usually physical. And this affects how you focus.
But if I was a patient and I was talking to you and you said this to me, I would feel so relieved because it would feel like I could really do something about that.
Right. You know, it's interesting you say that because often a patient will tell me a lot of things. One of the things they will say is, how do you know this before I even tell you? I said, well, it's 3,000 years of Chinese medicine. But it's also the difference, going back a little bit to the difference between my dad's way of doing consultation, my way. Half of how I do consultation is educating the patient.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to be a patient in this country. Often patients go to see a doctor, you're trying to talk to them about your symptom, and they will either say, you're not feeling the symptom, then make you doubt yourself, or say, well, that's not a thing. You know, here is the thing in health economics, we see this often. When it shows up in your metabolic panel blood result, or it shows up on X-ray or MRI, that means it's too late.
Yeah, it's been there.
It is there. So from having nothing to being here, it takes a long time. And then Chinese medicine, that's why it's ultimately the medicine of prevention. When you have these symptoms, you're not mad, you have them. Even in health economics, when we interview people, and we will as economists always take your feeling about your health as the right answer. You know best about your body. I don't. Yeah. I need to ask you. And if you tell me that's how you feel, like one of my patients will sleepwalk, and she's been sleepwalking for 20 odd years as an adult, and we fixed that with our herbal formula. And she said, she's like, yeah, I was still sleepwalking. I said, how did you know? And she said, I got up and I would notice like things got messed up. And her doctors won't think that. They will just keep giving her antidepressant.
Mm-hmm.
That does nothing to the root. And the root was she also has seriously bad digestive issues. And digestion has everything to do with your mind when you're unconscious at night.
Yeah.
So this is
so
all
there was no
interlinked.
rest and digest for her. It was just...
It's your subconscious, right? That is still working. So I don't ever question a patient. When they say, I feel this way, I would never say, are you sure about that? No, they are sure.
Right.
That is the accurate. And you as a practitioner is supposed to work with what is the truth for the patient, not the truth that you think you know better. And I think that's fundamentally what is interesting about Chinese medicine for me is I am a data person. I know how those data, has been gathered. And I know the pro and con, of a data. So,
but you're gathering data points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I watched my dad since I was a kid in his clinic. You gather the most precious data of all time. You're gathering longitudinal data. Mm. That is not, Gabby at age 18 is Gabby from the age 5, 18, 25, 30, 35. Usually at different point in your life, a patient will come to see you for different cases. For example, I often treat a patient for example, for long COVID, and alopecia, she's now cured from that, and she wants to come back because she prepares to be pregnant. You get her data at different age. That is the most accurate data. Yeah. So when people talk about and say, oh, Chinese medicine is pseudoscience, I'm like, first off, you need to re-educate yourself on what's the definition of science. And second of all, definitely reread to understand what is really the most accurate data point. And that's when they ask, how do you know? I'm like, well, I'm a Columbia-educated economist.
Yeah, and 3,000. But like you said, I always think it's so fascinating that our mentality is we'll take a pill. And you've mentioned SSRIs a couple times, and I've read, recently in the last 6 months, like a lot of it, they're saying probably doesn't work anyway. But we're so quick. That's easy. What do they call it? White coat syndrome. We're okay getting it, just give me the pill. Versus a practice that's been around for thousands of years, and the observing patients and seeing how things change. I find it always fascinating. You mentioned skin. And autoimmune, is that also digestion and gut? Where do you think, because skin is in like eczema or
psoriasis.
Psoriasis.
It's interesting. I have a personal fascination with psoriasis because I love traveling, especially to rainy, damp countries like Scandinavia. Yeah. If you look at the statistics, Danes or certain Germans from certain parts of Germany or, Norway, like they have higher chances of having skin problems, right? It has a lot to do with the weather, being damp, being cold, they don't get sun. Psoriasis, for example, has become very common in America. I have seen every kind of like psoriasis under the sun. It could appear as young as a kid who was like 1-year-old baby. It could appear on, generic, your father has it, you have it. But in America, when people come, they will say, I have psoriasis. And I said, well, no. Let's wait for me to ask my questions with my hormonal health, my, gynecology and everything, energy and sleep first. Most of my patients are very gracious. They don't ask me why, because I will give them an answer at the end of it when I give them the root cause. Sometimes a patient will ask me and they will say like, oh, I just have psoriasis. You see, that's the thing. In America, we think of the body and the symptom as an isolated thing. I have a skin problem. That's it. It's because most of the time, nobody has asked you, nobody has cared. Do you have problem falling asleep and staying asleep? Do you have any of the following digestive symptoms? Are you sensitive to the cold? When you do have psoriasis attack, how does it feel? It is so comprehensive the way we ask, because just because you have psoriasis, your psoriasis for Steven is fundamentally different from psoriasis for Jenny.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that's why when people say, oh, I just have psoriasis, I'm fine otherwise. And then through the consultation, they will realize they're not fine. They're actually sicker than they think they do.
Yeah.
Because the skin, I treat a lot of hives as well. That is the outer skin, or, psoriasis is deeper. It could have something to do with the lung health, because lung is about hydrating the outer layer. It definitely has something to do with digestive health. There is no psoriasis patient who has no digestive issues. No one.
Mm-hmm.
Either you're lying or I haven't done the job to ask the questions. You definitely do. And most psoriasis patient, for example, will be a light sleeper. Or they sleep fine, but they wake up not feeling refreshed. There is a fundamental metabolic problem there.
Yeah.
So it is way more than that. And I think the way we live in this society, we're so ingrained to say, I have a solution for everything, right?
Yeah.
You feel this, I have a pill. You feel this, I have a pill. Where my patients are constantly amazed, where they have 20 symptoms and one formula in 3 bottles will just deal with it.
Yeah.
Because Chinese medicine is all about the root cause, getting you to rebalance yourself. And when you're done, you're done.
Do you have little things you do? I know what you said she and all these things, like this idea of your life force. Are there things that you do that are pretty fundamental to, we talked about walking, that let's say you were in pretty good health, that would defend or support your life force?
Yeah, I have 2 things. Very strange. But because I'm a very socially awkward person, so I will share it. Number 1 is I always practice the Taoist principle Wu Wei, which literally means you do nothing productive.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I introduce this concept to my patients, a lot of people are like, does that mean I should just go to the gym? I should hit the gym more, shouldn't I? I'm like, no, it's about learning crochet when you're terrible at it.
Yeah.
It's about gardening. You're terrible at it. You're really not achieving anything in that hour or 2. Before I came to your house, I was looking at the flowers. I was walking down the street or read a book, actually myself, and I got a lot of strange stares because I'm not achieving anything. I wasn't looking at my work emails. You have to allow yourself to be. Because, like the Buddhist said, the day-to-day life is the reality. And we often escape from that reality by saying, hey, you know what? Next month, I'm going to go to Spain. That's when I'm going to have fun. Like right now, I'm just suffering. But you're not living in reality. Reality is hard. Reality is, in my personal case, is when I realized I was seeing still patients the morning after my husband came up to tell me it's all gone.
Yeah.
Is to see the pictures and not believing it. But that's the reality. It's about living what is real vis-a-vis the future that at best might be an illusion, depending on how you see it.
Right.
Right? And the second thing, and practicing Wu Wei help you. I'm here at beautiful Malibu, seeing outside your house, which is gorgeous, appreciating the spring flowers. That's real. Maybe down the road, I will be the goat of Chinese medicine or something. That is not real. We don't even think about that. You focus on the present. It's the time we're spending together now. That's what's real. It's the time I'm crying for my house. That's real.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is I have no problem following a routine. I am a creator of routine, and usually I am definitely the person with low maintenance. But when I travel, I become an instant high maintenance person because I know everything will be different. I love that. But I also need to keep the basics. So I always sleep by 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
I will always spend at least an hour reading my book. I will always squeeze in time during the weekend or, during depending on, to prioritize actually, to watch a really brainless show that I love. Like really brainless. To the point that my team just couldn't understand. They're like, "Really? You like it?" So my favorite will range from Love Is Blind Argentina,
specific,
to, very specific, to You season 4. Don't tell me the ending. I haven't watched it because, and most people will be like, "Yeah, but you're an entrepreneur. Like you have 2 kids. Like you're like such a busy life. Like why would you waste?" It's not about wasting time. It's about going through your day-to-day, your rituals, your time spending with your family at work, and you're fully doing that. When you're doing it, your heart is fully at it. Not, I'm just going to suffer and I will only enjoy it down the road in 3 months. That's, if anything, like losing my house taught me, like whatever you plan, no matter how hard you want it, might just go puff one day. We spent so long building an ADU in the back of our house, and it was supposed to be my father and my dream of an intergenerational home. It had just, you spent so long building it, you picked the tiles, and now you think about it, I don't regret anything. You put your effort in it, you give your best, but the future is maybe an illusion. It might or may not work.
Yeah. And
all you could have is the present. And all these little shows and my books, they remind me what is the important thing in life.
It's so true, though. And I think sometimes when we're so many things to so many different people, it's nice to actually have these silly, guilty, harmless little pleasures that also we're sort of just being a part of us that doesn't, it's not so serious. It doesn't have to be grown up. It doesn't have to be worried about making money. It's just like, just an hour of doing whatever for the sake of it. When you talk a lot about the menstrual cycle, one of my daughters was like, "What?" So you were saying that clotting is like a no-go, that means that there's sort of like a block up, maybe like a log jam, and it's not maybe flowing as continuously as it should. Wouldn't you say most people probably have it the wrong way? As far as like most people, I think most women, when they get their cycles, first 2 days, get these sort of clots.
They also get a bunch of PMS symptoms, right?
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting playing sports. And I know, this is something I really appreciate about Chinese medicine is like, hey, that quiet during your menstrual, don't have sex. Coming from sports, you had to do what you had to do. So in a perfect world, let's say, hey, let's take it more easy on your cycle. Maybe warmth and nurturing, right? I know the joke was like she was put out in a separate house, kind of. I was like, okay, well, who's that for, her or for the family? I don't know. So we're not supposed to suffer and be dying with huge cramps and all of these things. So if someone comes to you, a female, and let's say she's younger, what do you think, or what can be some of the reasons why her cycle is not as healthy as it could be?
So it's interesting about younger women. We sometimes forget, maybe it's just me. I think the hardest time in my life was when I was a teenager.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I think for most of us, that's the case, if you think about it. You're hitting the, puberty. You don't know who you are. Other people pretend knowing who they are. You don't know who you are. And you're hitting with period. You're hitting with pain. You're going through so much of physical and mental transformation. That mental transformation has very much so an impact on your physical transformation. But then what happens in this country when, we go to our parents, back in the days, I don't know about now, and say, hey, mom, my period really sucks. Like, it's so painful. I don't want to deal with it. your mom takes you to the gynecologist, you got put on pill immediately.
Yeah, which is that can be devastating.
So then what happens? This important indicator, that is your menstrual cycle every single month, important, it comes out of your body, no matter how gross you think it is, which is like the tongue, a very good indicator of your health, goes puff.
Yeah.
Then again, we're talking about that pill just and say, well, it's like a debt. And you're like, I'm not paying it now, right? I'm going to pay it. When do you pay it? Mm-hmm. You'll pay it when you're in your mid 30s, married a person you love, and you're like, I want to get pregnant. So the prevalence of contraceptive pills in this country has a lot to do with fertility issues in this country.
Yeah, of course.
You wait for 10 years, and I always say this to parents, right? Whenever I have a teenage girl, and I will say, they will want this suffering to end even before it even fully begins. You could adjust it very easily on a person who's younger to make the period symptoms go away. And then you will be good to go, so long as you do the good behaviors, not eating ice cream like every single time and not going swimming when you're on the menstrual cycle. And, be consistent with your exercise, but don't overdo it. Like all of these things. But most of the time, what happens? We don't even get to that point.
Yeah.
They take a pill. Then we're talking about 10 or 15 years of contraceptive pills. In the process, you might have changed for something else, another device. Sooner or later, whether it's because you want to have a kid or you notice that your body is no longer behaving the way you want it to, you're surprised by the symptoms.
Yeah.
And for a younger person, I will always say it's a very easy adjustment. It doesn't take that long, and then it's done.
Right.
Then I have people down the road who are like, I have fertility problems. I've tried IVF 4 times. How long you were on contraceptive pills, right?
Yeah.
Life is not a linear cycle. But in this country in particular, we needed it to be a linear cycle.
Yeah.
It's like we only tackle it when it's really a problem. Otherwise, it's not a problem. We're not doing it. So this is, I think, in America in particular, we have so many people with PCOS. We have so many people with PMDD. We have so many people with endometriosis. You name it, we have it. And now the solution goes so extreme. You will have young girls who are like, I can't deal with endometriosis. I will have hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Obviously, your body, your choice by the end of the day.
Yeah, of course.
But all I'm saying is people maybe want to look at a different option and know that there is a different way before going to the ultimate. Because there isn't, as much as our society tells us every single time, whenever there is a new product, the goal of the marketing is always, this is it. This is the magic pill. And everyone falls for it. Everyone is like, magic pill. Then you infinitely get more disappointed until the next startup idea happens, right? It's like magnesium is the new vitamin D. Like it solves everything. No, it doesn't. I see it firsthand clinically. It can really trigger heart palpitation.
Yeah.
So there isn't, but for younger girls, going back to it, it's more about parents being more present, being more in tone. You don't need to know everything about their business, but they have an outlet where they can process this crazy world that's around them, that the fears they have, the judgment they inevitably feel, and do the right nutrition. Yeah. Instead of, I will eat salad like my friend Elizabeth because she said I will lose weight. And then who and who will go out with me for prom. Focus on what's important rather than, which I have seen it definitely personally, where copy your parents' model and maybe your parents didn't know and your mom tell you like eating frosting from a cupcake is absolutely bad for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe not focusing on the little thing, but grander thing.
Yeah, the bigger things.
Yeah.
What about young women? When they have their cycles, they'll oftentimes have these pretty wicked breakouts.
Yeah. So acne is usually in this country seen only as a skin problem. We talked about this.
Yes.
And I often have women say like, it's just a skin problem. It's not just a skin problem.
Yeah.
Usually, you know, especially if we talk about acne that comes during PMS, you also have a bunch of PMS symptoms that range from emotional dysregulation to extreme fatigue to excessive bloating. And if you think about it, it's like you usually have those, especially digestively, you usually have those problems, but not so intense.
Right.
But then you will have it in a 5 times worse before your period, right? That's because digestion triggers the blood. It gives you the blood, triggers the energy, but then also has to give you a period. But it's like one of those people who never get credit, and then you're just like, hey, do Steven's job also, and I will not pay you for the extra.
Yeah.
So what happens? It will silently cease, and it doesn't do any job well. This is the reason why your digestive symptoms get worse. And digestion, blood nourishes the skin. When there is no perfect flow of blood, there is acne issue.
Yeah.
But most of the time what happens when a young girl, you know, when they're at an age where they really care about how people see them, they want it done. They want this just to disappear. But you will see throughout your life, women during perimenopause or menopause has acne come back. And you're like, why is this coming back to bite me?
Yeah.
Because you never really solved the root problem.
Issue.
Right.
It's so funny as a female, right? You have puberty, then you're trying to have babies, then you're dealing, you know, I'm 55. It's been very interesting. I'm just now starting to feel some differences. And I know you deal with women with perimenopause or premenopause or, you know, postmenopause or what are you seeing if they're pretty lined up? Because, you know, in the US, we talk a lot about being strong enough, you know, not getting frail as you get older, especially women. It's always sort of like, I want to be skinny. I want to be thin. Do you have these conversations with women that are menopausal? Like and let's say that they're just overall healthy, but your body's changing. What's the conversation there with those types of women? Is it like, hey, we're going to supplement and boost? Like, what are the things that you can boost a pretty healthy woman during menopause that kind of help the glide, the wake up at 2 happen?
I think the biggest problem for women who are going through menopause, especially in this country, is how little we talk about menopause, first off. It's this mysterious milestone that no one talks about. You're just going to do it and all. If you think about childbirth, don't talk about that enough either. Postpartum, nobody really talked about it until recently. We kind of just expect women, like even pregnancy is just like, you should just do it. It's natural. You just do it. And then people are surprised when that doesn't happen immediately, right? And I think it's the disconnect. It's the disconnect for a woman going through perimenopause or menopause. There is the confusion where you feel that there is a disconnect between what your body wishes and what your mind wishes. You still, and I'm going back to that candle example.
Yeah.
Your aspirations and your wants might dim a little bit, but most of the time it's still burning bright. But then you feel like, why is my body not catching up? Because the wax is getting thinning before you even realize it. Everyone is gathering, you know, fact, like so-and-so, Susan had nice sweat, but I don't, because, you know, the reality is, sad to break it to people, in Chinese medicine, there are 2 types of menopausal symptoms. Not everyone will have the same type of menopausal symptoms.
Right.
The treatment should be different. And I will always tell people this, and this is what patients tell me after, is really, first off, you're still you. And you at this age group, and you recognizing the issue, which is not an issue, is a health milestone, is the first step of making changes. Rather than, I don't have these issues. I definitely had patients who were like, oh, but I didn't. And I'm like, really? I'm quoting notes in both languages here. Like, you had this. You have people who are in denial. The first is to accept that this is something that's happening to me.
Yeah.
And when we deal with menopausal patients, very often is the first sign of change is your menstrual cycle. Either gets shorter or you might have it twice a month, or you don't even know when you're having it. You might have delayed and your overall blood flow drops. That is accompanied with all these old PMS symptoms that you thought after childbirth, they left you, but now they're coming rushing back. Mm-hmm. You have low motivation. You feel it's more difficult to lose weight and all of that. You're just feeling you're not yourself. This body that has suffered so much is now coming back to bite you and say, hey, don't know who you are. It's about bridging that disconnect. And I always say with menopause is that we all arrive at that station as women. It's like arriving at Paddington Station.
Yeah.
But what is very common these days is that people rushing into Paddington Station without being prepared. You wake up one morning and you're like, okay, hasn't come in 6 months. And doctor is like, okay, you're starting like menopause. Or in 12 months, you're like, doctor is like, okay, menopause. And now just deal with it.
Yeah.
And you're like, what now? First off is you're not supposed, for most of women I see during perimenopause, and some people as early as 37 will start showing symptoms. You're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to be taking like all these like little English country road, stops. Yeah. You're not supposed to be ending it.
Right.
But because of stress, life events, even chemotherapy, it could really move your perimenopausal symptoms a decade earlier. And then it hit you when you least expect it. So all I do is to get you another ticket. Let's go on a round trip of England on small country stops so you don't start menopause unless you absolutely have to. Yeah. And when you do start, you'll have as few symptoms as possible.
Yeah.
Where people look as young as possible, and that is very possible. I think one of my patients told me lately, she said, I don't know what you did, but now my husband and I are back to our teenage years again. I think she meant about the bedroom, where she had so much, she had a lot of dryness. There was no libido, there was no performance, and then everything changed. It's totally doable. And Chinese medicine has been doing this for women in Asia for the longest time.
Yeah.
But in here, I feel like, once we reach a certain age, you're no longer seen by society as a breeding person who has breeding potential, then we forget about you, right?
Yeah.
But the reality, if you look at statistics, is fascinating. We women across the board live at least 5 years longer than men. What women don't see, and this is how I learned with Chinese medicine rather than my old life as an economist, those 5 years of extra life, or even before that, are usually one level of suffering than the rest, because women tend to have lived longer, but the quality of life might not be better.
Yeah.
And that has everything to do with how you make the perimenopausal to menopausal transition. Because that's when, with your metabolic, system starts declining, and most of the time you'll hear women say like, oh, it's easier to gain weight. You also have mental issues, right? You have low motivation. You feel like crying for no reason. You feel like, I just don't enjoy my life anymore. Like I have so good, but I'm just disconnecting. What is wrong with me? And then you spend so much time living in your head, then you're gradually removed from the present, right? But it's not meant to be that way, because but how you navigate that time matters, because if you don't, when your mental and physical strengths decline, when your body, as we call it, generates less yin energy, so that's female hormones and all of that good stuff, you head to a state of overall decline.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of just, you feel you fall off a stiff mentally and physically. And that's not necessary.
Do you think if someone in China, or a country like that, where there's sort of, like you were saying, the community, I also think it's conditioning, because I'll even have friends that, because our culture does sort of really obsess about youth. It's a huge industry, right? instead of like all the amazing things that do come with a little bit of life's experience, and how satisfying and gratifying that can be. I also, part of it is for me, like that education, where I feel like in China, it's like you respect elders. There's a place for them in the community. So it creates that reciprocal value where a young person maybe can't talk to their parents, but they could talk to their grandparents, or just sort of all of that I feel like we don't maybe cultivate as much here, that makes those transitions maybe even harder.
Yeah, I think also is because I am an economist, I always like to follow the money, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
In this society, it is ironic because if you think about who are the richest in this country, is really an older group, right?
Yeah,
the market keeps responding. Let's do makeup. Let's do like useful product. They don't stop and think, like, maybe you should look at, like, disposable income is definitely not the early group, it's actually a later group.
Yeah.
But the reality is also that nuisance, the wisdom, the nuance, the nonlinear pathways, all of that come from being older, that from, I love working with my oldest patient to date. She is a patient based in France, and I treated her for a failed colon cancer treatment, where she was basically homebound and she couldn't go out to do her favorite things anymore. Now she's great. She's like the captain of swim team in wherever she is in France. She is in her late 70s. I learned so much from her. I learned so much from my not 20-year-old patients. I learned so much from my teenage patients, or even my 3-year-old patient. But like, my point is this: when you're older and wiser, you see things not in black and white anymore.
Yes.
You know that one decision you make in your life is not going to necessarily forever ruin your life. You can always come back from that. Like, you take a wrong exit on PCH or something, you can always come back up. It might take a little, but down the road, I mean, what does it matter?
It's not a big deal, yeah.
And that, to me, and I think in Chinese medicine, is infinitely healthier than a person who is like, I am going to build the biggest company this country has ever seen. I'm just, because life is not that. Right. I mean, if anything, economically speaking, who knows what's going to happen to the stock market or the exchange rate in the next day or two.
Yeah.
It is ultimately about having a mindset that you'll say, in life, I may face the biggest wave, inspired by your husband again, but how I don't get killed in that wave.
Yeah.
How I don't go under. It's not about, okay, I would just avoid the wave. You can't.
No.
You really can't.
Yeah.
It's coming, and probably coming for all of us, but how you navigate.
Yeah.
And that comes, in your way of looking at health also. It's not just, I need to have a baby. I need to get pregnant. Your health as a mother, even before IVF, is fundamentally important to the baby's health.
Yeah,
this is why I see so many kids after IVF who has food intolerance or crazy eczema. And then the mother after IVF, if they don't take care of themselves, will then feel infinitely less healthy, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about baby, the end goal. It's about a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could talk on and on. I have a few more things I want to ask you, though. Your dad, does he ever seek your advice?
That's a great question. He does. We co-write formula together.
I saw some footage of the two of you. It was beautiful. Yeah. You with your computer and him with his book.
Yeah, that is us. We do this very painful thing, the traditional way, which he forces me, and I happily oblige, where every single patient that comes to me, we do 1 hour consultation. I write the patient's important summaries and everything in English. Then I translate it into Chinese. And then my dad and I will have a session where we'll specifically discuss about this patient and the patient's symptoms. Based on that, we co-write a formula. We might argue because the direction might be different. And that's how we do it every single time. So many people are like,
that's awesome.
Oh, but how you have such a high success rate with these crazy, insane, weird disorders. I'm like, it takes so much effort. Like,
I was thinking too, when just even the act of translating it over into Chinese, that the Chinese characters represent something else that maybe gives you some other information other than just, okay, the English word.
Yeah.
But then even that extra layer.
Yeah.
And
then the tongue. I have my opinion about the tongue and he has his.
Yeah.
And we have to agree. Most of the time we're right. Can I say I will repair 100% of patients will come to me? No.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can, but I think our success rate is at 85%.
Which is amazing.
And they're all crazy, rare, complex. I mean, not rare. I mean, I have so many infertility patients.
Well, that seems to be the big one now.
Yeah, but like also long COVID or issues that you think you're delusional, your doctor told you that, or PCOS, PMDD, so many.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really important that I will always say to my patient that you're never wrong. Don't think, am I insane?
Yes.
I'm feeling this, but like they told me it's just, my mom told me something from the Western medicine perspective that I thought is interesting. She said, autoimmune conditions reflect the shortcomings of Western medicine. Whenever a doctor can't make sense of something, sooner or later, it will be autoimmune.
They just slap that on.
Right. Then you would say autoimmune. Then what happens usually in this country is that then people pay so much money to do more tests. But usually, you still need to, it's not one single cell that would determine this for the rest of the life. It is about your day-to-day functioning. How do you sleep? How is your energy? This doesn't change. Whether you have cancer, you have lupus, or you have like PMDD, it doesn't matter. Like I ask this all the same. Because ultimately, it's about how you fundamentally feel. This is why whenever people say like, oh, I just recovered from cancer, I feel like crap. You definitely haven't healed.
Yeah.
And trust me, that will catch up with you like sooner or later.
Yeah.
Trust yourself. And then we say in this country, like, trust your gut. Yeah. This is why digestive health is so important. You don't have a gut, then you don't know what to trust.
You don't know what you're feeling.
Right? So
do you, I know when we were talking earlier about the birth control, because I've done a lot of interviews about this and even about how like it changes your choice. For women, they'll actually they'll be attracted to one type of partner when they're on the pill. And then when they get off the pill because they want to have a child, all of a sudden, I mean, like beyond the health things, there's all these other things. So I have 3 daughters. They'll choose different ways, but I'm curious first, let's say a parent listening or a young adult who's like, hey, I can't afford to, or I don't want to get pregnant. And I know you cannot tell people what to do, but are there things that you would direct them to investigate as a form of protection from pregnancy?
I'm going to share something really funny. You're going to laugh at this. When I was in college in England, I was one of the few international students at the time in this very old institution in England. And England at the time had the highest teenage pregnancy rate in Europe. So what the university did was to put condoms in every dorm. There's a bag of condoms. So I went to this university that is so ancient, so conservative. It's where they filmed part of Harry Potter, actually.
Sure.
And I saw the condoms and I thought, that is interesting as a business opportunity. So because nobody was grabbing them, I was baffled. So I grabbed all the condoms. I hope nobody come back at me and accuse me of this. And then when everybody went clubbing, university clubbing, I would distribute them to my friends. And I'm like, why don't you just take one? Let the boys do their job.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I find it fascinating still in this day and age when we are all...
That the onus is on the female.
Yeah, and nobody talks about the boys. Yeah. Everyone is like, well, should I be, should I just... No, you should not.
Yeah, the worst thing that happens is a yeast infection, right? Like you get some latex.
Right. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Condom was invented a long time ago, right? You don't like the American made, you can find the Japanese made. You can find all kinds of choice. Even gift it to your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Always have a condom.
There, yeah.
You know, in your pocket. Let the boys do it.
And we touched on it earlier, but I think it's really important. And I know people get grossed out by it. And I'm all about, being discreet. But people should be looking at their elimination. Are they pooping? As a rule, are you sort of saying to people, hey, I need you to sort of eliminate once a day, or at least, is there sort of an amount that seems like it would be an indication of good health?
Once a day formed. Once a day formed.
Okay.
You will have a lot of people in this country who somehow got told by, I don't know who, that you should poop every single time you eat. No, you don't.
Oh, yeah, no.
Once a day formed.
We're not dogs.
Because if you poop too often, which happens a lot to men, actually. Some people, if anybody is listening, you have a date and they went probably doing their business in the middle of a meal. That is never good. Usually that means that there is a kidney qi issue, meaning that literally you can't hold. So this doesn't only happen to the poop, it also happens to urination. You will notice that if you have a partner who does that often, you notice they pee all the time also. Regardless of whether they're thirsty or not, they're just always going to pee. At night, they're going to pee. They get up to pee because there's no holding mechanism in Chinese medicine. And that is a serious vitality issue. Usually it's the same type of people who also will be told by Western medicine doctor they have low male hormone, right? And they also feel lethargic all the time. They might eat a lot, but it's all out. They're skinny as a stalk, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they also might be suffering from Crohn's to colon issues. Once a day formed, because think about it. First off, who has the time to poop 4 times a day? What do you do when you're on the toilet? It should be a very quick thing. You go poop, you're done.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And some people think this is not a big deal. It is a big deal because urination, if you're peeing all the time, this happens to a lot of men, you're peeing once every 40 minutes or something. And sometimes you don't even have to pee. You just have the urge. That means it's not, in Western medicine, it's nervous system and blah, blah, blah. In Chinese medicine, often you will be able to trace it back to energy, where somewhere around the metabolic system, there is an issue. For example, if you notice a person is never hungry unless they work out.
Yeah.
This might happen to them. If you have low libido or performance-wise ejaculation, not enough of seminal fluid, it is also related. It is related to, these are important health indicators that our body are designed to give it to you, but very few people pay attention to it. I often will have a patient who's I never looked at it. I'm no, definitely look at it. It is important. Are you pooping, for example, pellets?
What does that mean? If there's little pellets, are you stressed out?
Often happen to people who have irritable bowel movement. It also sometimes happens a lot to people who think they have constipation. Usually it's a liver qi stagnation issue, which means the person is chronically stressed. And IBS, irritable bowel movement issue, symptom, has everything to do with your emotional stagnation. If think about it. What happens to an IBS person when it's time to do a presentation to your whole company? You go poop.
You get that
multiple
release,
times.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're just going and going, and then you have a stomach ache and you're having clammy hands.
Yeah.
You have those physical responses.
Yeah.
So pay attention to your poop. If you are a person who I don't even know what triggers it, but I sometimes have dry stool, then I sometimes have muddy stool. Is it what I eat? No. Likely it's because your body is unable to process that blender. Your blender is now a Ninja Bullet $20. No offense to Ninja Bullet.
Yeah.
It is not a Vitamix 500. It's unable to process certain foods. So is it the foods problem? No, it's your digestion. So this is why whenever people say eliminate this, eliminate that, it's not a long-term solution because often people who feel they have intolerance to certain food will also notice as they get older, they're intolerant to even more food.
Right.
Wouldn't life be so stressful? You go to a good restaurant and you're just like one of those characters in Portlandia going through every single ingredient, right? That always is linked, if you think about it, to energy.
Yeah.
There isn't a single person I have seen who have, for example, irritable bowel movement or Crohn's who does not have an energy problem, because digestion triggers the chi, the energy, the functionality of you after you're born.
Yeah.
So if you can't get this ninja bullet fixed and upgraded to like Vitamix 500, I don't even know whether that's a real module, but maybe $500. My luxurious blender. This will drain your energy, and subsequently your male hormones, subsequently your sex life, subsequently your stress level, subsequently your urination. It's a whole deal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's really, I really appreciate, we try to live a little bit like that, but I really think sometimes, you've had born into the great fortune of having your dad, with all of this wisdom and knowledge. If somebody wanted just to read more, to open their mind, to learn, has anyone done a good job of a book that is available for them to just even get more introduced to some of the philosophies?
My two favorites, they have been long translated because Chinese medicine, different from other ancient medicine, ancient Chinese love to write. They wrote everything down. There were so many books, you couldn't stop them. They didn't even care their names were on and on. Like they were just there. So, although there's only a small fraction that has been translated, we're not short of them. My favorite ones for the layman, and honestly, when I say layman, I think all my followers are really smart. Everyone is really smart if you want to learn it.
Yeah.
One is the Yellow Emperor Classics. Weird name, I agree. But is a really good fundamental test. Is very well translated that you can read. And then my favorite is Book of Changes, which is my all-time favorite. I think I once at an interview, they said, what is going to be the one book you take to an island is the Book of Changes. So in Chinese is Yi Jing. Yi Jing literally means, Yi Jing means Book of Changes. It is on the surface about Taoism and then even fortune telling in so many ways and feng shui. All of them are based on Book of Changes, including Chinese medicine. What is really amazing about Book of Changes ultimately is to teach us that life, that is our bodily mechanism or the world that we live, at, is a constant revolving yin and yang mechanism. The best you can do is to be resilient, have your eyes open, ears open, and take things as they are. Yeah. But it is a beautiful book that is so complex that I had to read it in Chinese, then read it in English, then read it in Chinese again, and then read it in English because it's so complex. But very well translated, highly recommend. In fact, you might even be, able to do your own feng shui if you read it. It has so much of good stuff. And I think just, open your eyes and be open to the experience.
I really appreciate that. Well, can you just remind people all the places they can find you if they want to dive in even deeper on you and your work?
Everyone can follow me at KUN Health. You will see some funny videos because, obviously I am funny, I think. And also sign up for our email list where I often share exclusive tips and stuff. And if anybody want to become a patient, is the same thing. You can follow the link. We're usually quite booked, but you might just get lucky. Yeah.
There's so many things I could cover, but if there was something that just occurred to you that felt important as an invitation or a reminder to people before we go, I just wanted to put it back on to you.
I think it's the good old American statement that I love so much. Believe in yourself. But it's not just about that sentence to say that how inflatable your power is. It's more be in tune with your mental and physical health and believe in your symptoms, believe your every single feeling, and knowing that you hold ultimately the key to your health. I am great at what I do, but I am not you. Ultimately, you have to face first accepting you as you are, recognizing I have these issues, and then be open to the changes. So believe in yourself is fundamental. Yeah. Rather than saying, hey, someone who sells this, I don't know, snake oil knows my health better than I do. Like, even I won't say to my patients, oh, I know your health better than you do.
Yeah.
No, you know all your symptoms. You might not know how they, pathologically form in a certain way, but you know how you feel.
Yeah.
And always never forget that. Yeah.
Yeah. I always appreciate the idea of, that sovereignty that but then with that comes the responsibility that if you say to me, hey, Gabby, this is what we're seeing, you have to make these changes.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is, hey, you have to be responsible for that. Do you ever fire patients if they're not complying? Like if you make a suggestion over and over and they just won't do it?
Yes. And rare. Most of my patients listen to me, but you will have patients with suspicious rather.
Oh, uh-huh.
Right. Where they are confused, or they, instead of following the protocol, and they will ask 2 million questions, which you should. But at one point you're like, can we just stick to this and see what happens, right? Or if I help a patient, a long time ago, there was a patient who came to me with severe liver damage. And I said, no drinking. The minute he got back to 30.0, he started drinking again. You are responsible. This is not like Western medicine, which you take a pill. This is a passive experience. This is an interactive. I do my job. You do your job.
Yeah.
Your job is don't do what I told you not to do. Right.
Yeah.
So that comes with a certain degree of responsibility.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Jiaming, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
People are lucky to have access to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's
so kind of you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for spending some time with me. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, feel free to share it with your friends, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, I want to hear from you. Tell me what's working, what's resonating with you, and how you're getting it done. Keep going.